focusing on that area where the parents have their own values, the school has their own values. But my goal is to come in and say, what is your own value? What do you think about life? How do you see life? What do you see for your future? What do you want for yourself? What are your own belief systems? So that's why I come in the middle between the parent and the school and the system, and try to support these young people to have a strong sense of their own self, because society definitely is pouring a lot into our children today. And it's important for them to recognize that they have the power to be able to alter the will and how their future looks.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the You Can Be Anything podcast. Your girl, Soso Babes here. Hope you're all doing good and having an amazing weekend. It is yet another weekend, another of those days that Soso Babes brings to you amazing guests to talk about the things we do, right? It is what I do. It's what I enjoy doing. And I hope that you enjoy this episode as well. And do not hesitate to leave your comments, your questions in the comment section. And my guests and I will be responding to those questions at the end of our chat. So today I am blessed to have Lira Ndifon. Hey, Lira, thank you so much for saying yes to my invitation. And welcome to the You Can Be Anything podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. So today we have Lira. Lira is the host of the Self-Reflection podcast. I went through your page and I was impressed. I was like, okay, this is great. I love to see somebody that touches those, like it's personal. Self-reflection is a personal thing. It's that introspection that sometimes I wish I can actually get into that space and find that moment for me, right? So I think it's a very interesting niche you've picked there. But hey, before we go ahead talking about the Self-Reflection podcast and Lira in general, please kindly tell our guests, our listeners a little bit about yourself. Who is Lira Ndifon?
Hi, everybody. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to be on your platform and also allowing me to share Self-Reflection podcast, with your family here on your Anything podcast. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Who am I? I am Lira Ndifon. I'm originally from Cameroon, to be precise, Bamenda, Ngi, and I currently live in the U.S. I am a case worker in the Bay Area, and I host Self-Reflection podcast and Africa Today. And yeah, for a little sum of who I am, I guess. And also, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an auntie. So,
awesome. Shout out to all the Ngi people in the building. The most popular Ngi girl I know is Deli Singer because she sings it everywhere. So Deli Singer, I have your Ngi sister with me on the platform today. So if somebody is watching, tag Deli Singer to come see her Ngi sister. So thank you so much, Lira, for accepting to come on the podcast with me and to just share your experience, right? Share what you do. And again, the intention of the You Can Be Anything podcast is to remind the people who listen to me that, hey, we really have the potential to do what we want to do in as much as we put in the work, right? It is okay to dream and to dream big. And when you dream big, it is important that you also not only dream, but put in the work to achieve those dreams. So thanks again for coming to my podcast, my Bamenda sister, my Ngi sister. Again, it's always an honor when I talk to people that are familiar with the upbringing that we had growing up. So I appreciate you for honoring my invitation. So you do mention that you are a case worker in the Bay Area. And again, I have a general idea of what that is. And for someone listening, the reason I like to tap into what people do is just so someone listening can be like, oh, that's actually something that somebody can do. Is that something that I myself can look into? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that career that you have for yourself?
Yeah. So with this career, case working, I want to say I have also worked in different settings like peer advocates, which I work with young adults that struggle with their mental health. In that setting, with me being a peer advocate, which is why I think it really empowered me to want to take the route that I'm looking to take in the future. I work with young adults from 18 to 25 around there that struggle with mental health. And based on studies, it has also shown that a lot of people in that age group struggle with their mental health. So I work with that group, and then now work with a very wide range of groups with this case. Being a case manager here at this new company, because I work sometimes with children, but I also work with the parents at the same time with supporting them with finding community resources and scheduling of finding rides and finding therapists and depending on what their needs are in that space. So it varies from person to person, but the whole thing about the case working is providing care in that space.
Awesome. And you did touch around mental health, which is something that has become, the awareness around mental health has become very prominent these days, especially like, of course, it existed before, but when we got into the whole COVID area and you realize that people were losing it, right? Because of the shutdown and all of that, kids could not manage themselves anymore. Parents could not deal with their kids at home and all of that stuff that happened. I bet it must have been a really challenging period for you as a caseworker, having to work with those kids and all of that. How was the COVID period for you when COVID was skyrocketing? How did it feel for you? Was it an experience that you, again, let me leave it open so you can tell what COVID was like for you. Yes.
Yeah. The thing about COVID was I graduated in the middle of COVID. Yes, I was graduated from Cameroon in 2020, and that was we got sent home in the middle of the school year. So I didn't get to the opportunity to walk the stage and do all the things that people do graduate. That kind of just went by because when I came home, it didn't seem like I graduated. So there was no celebration. There was no, hey, welcome. You did all this 4 years. And, so there was that. And it kind of just, we moved on because COVID was the main priority, right?
Mm-hmm.
And working in that space at that time, it was challenging because it was challenging at first just to find a job,
Yep.
In that time. And then working with people that also struggle with their mental health. Sometimes you couldn't be in person with that person. So that was a big barrier there in that space. And, a lot of people that were struggling with their mental health kind of fell through the cracks during that time. And not only from our end, from I think systematically, that's why a lot of people struggle with their mental health during that time because of that in-person connection missing, right? Because as human beings, we need that connection, right? We need that touch. We need that intimate one-on-one time. We need that face time. So I think, during that time, it was a challenging period, not only for people that struggle with their mental health, but for everyone else.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Awesome. Again, I'm sorry you didn't get to wear your robe and walk down the podium, the stage. I'm sure now this is a graduation season, and I bet when you see all those graduation pictures and people, you're thinking like, oh, this is something that I missed because of COVID. The most important thing is the knowledge. I bet you got the knowledge you needed from your time at the uni, and now you are using that. So thanks for telling and for sharing that with us. Before we get into the self-reflection podcast, right? When you deciding to do this case management, to become a case worker, is that a career path that you had prepared for? Or is there something that motivated you to become a case worker? I know the reason I ask this, and give me, I always talk and I back question that I bring. It's because that is not something that we are very familiar with, at least to the best of my knowledge, going through education in Cameroon. By the way, did you study in Cameroon
Not really, no. I did most of my schooling here.
Yeah, so why case worker? What motivated you to pick that career, that thing to study?
I think it kind of came to me, because when I went to college to become an early childhood studies and human development. So I think when I was in college, I was thinking that I was going to get out and work with children because I love kids. But when I came out of college, a lot of preschools were closed down because there were no, schools open. Also, there's a lot that like played into me working as a caseworker now. But when I came out, I started looking for jobs, and I have also went through a process at school at Sonoma State my last year where I also struggled with my mental health. So studying what the human body was like, what developmental stages we hit in our life, and then also struggling with my mental health and trying to figure that out when I was at Sonoma State, right? For certain reason why, just to be clear, like the reason why I also struggled with my mental was because I was attaching it to basketball. So there's a whole other story on that part. But when I moved out and I came out, I kind of just landed this job that took me as a peer advocate. And then from there, I also was working as a caregiver part time, trying to make ends meet because living in California is not easy, not cheap at
Yeah.
all. So I was also doing caregiving at the same time, and while I was working as a peer advocate, and then I got this job as a case manager now, just this past year that just passed towards the end, December. And it's fulfilling, I think so. When you talk about moving forward in my career, I think getting all the knowledge from all the places that I've worked at as a peer advocate and as a caseworker, I end up becoming an NLP life coach, neuro linguistic life coach. So I want to pursue that path as I am now in this place that I'm in. That's a path that I'm pursuing. Offering my coaching services to young adults in that spaces where they're like 14 to 18, somewhere around there, because I think that's where a lot of us fall in the cracks. And then once we hit that 20 years old, we have a lot pile on already. So yeah, I think I answered your question and I went way off. But
Oh, of
yeah,
course, okay. That's nice. I got what you have in there, and which means that you're going to decide to become a case worker had something to do with your own personal experience, like having to deal with your own mental health. And if you hear me asking these questions, it's due to the fact I know, again, being a mother to a teenager, right?
mhm,
Being a mother to a teenager, I understand how challenging it can be for these kids. It frustrates me as a mother sometimes. Sometimes when I decide to put myself in their shoes, I feel that they are also frustrated with what they meet out in the world and what is coming from home. There is that conflict between the rules, the values of the home and the rules, the values of the society. So when I look at my little one, I see that conflict, right? Like, hey, this is what I want for my child. On the other side, this when she goes out to school, this is what the school is instilling in these children. And I just imagine the turmoil that takes place in her brain sometimes when she has to decide on which one to hold on to at what time. So it is
yeah,
still something that I don't have an understanding of. And I don't know, maybe
yeah.
you can throw some light on that one.
Yeah, I think that you explained it very beautifully, especially us that are coming from the motherland. Parents that grew up in Africa, I think there's this whole our culture, right? Like my parents, and I'm not sure how much of time you spend in Cameroon, but you grew up in a very different system than your daughter is growing up in. So you got to experience what it was like living in Africa, and you got to experience those values. However, you're trying, like in this space now, you're trying to tell your daughter values, but she hasn't had those experience. So there's that challenge there. And I love the fact that you even say you try to put yourself in her shoes, because I think what a lot of African parents don't recognize, or not even that they don't recognize, something that wasn't taught to our African parents, right, is to be able to put yourself in another person's shoes. Instead of most African parents, like, my way is a highway and that's it.
That's how we grew up, right? So
So I love that. And I think that's where I fall into the place where I want to do the coaching. And also I'm looking into going into grad school in the future. But it's coming with the knowledge that I have, that's where I fall into wanting to coach young boys and girls, focusing on that area where the parents, yes, the parents have their own values, the school has their own values, But my goal is to come in and say, what is your own value? What do you think about life? How do you see life? What do you see for your future? What do you want for yourself? What are your own belief systems? So that's why I come in the middle between the parent and the school and the system, and try to support these young people to have a strong sense of their own self, because society definitely is pouring a lot into our children today. And it's important for them to recognize that they have the power to be able to alter the will and how their future looks.
Yeah, but you see, I'm talking more about that because that is an honorable thing to do. And that's a profession that I definitely give you kudos for doing, because a lot of parents are frustrated in that space. Not only the parents, but also the kids. They get lost in the middle of all this, right? Some of them will be like, oh, I don't think my mom, my dad has a clue, at the teenage age. They'll be like, oh, mom, you don't understand what you're talking about, right? So being that bridge, coming in between the parents and the school and trying to coach these children and give them that space where they can actually, because as a parent, parents want the best for their children. Not many parents have that ability to let go and say, hey, child, your way, right? Not many parents can do that. Most parents, where they want their kids to do what they feel is good for the kids. And so there's a tendency that we as parents, we impose on these kids. So having someone like you be in the middle, right, as an intermediary between the household and the school and coaching these kids, I think it's a beautiful space to be in. And hey, girl, I wish you all the best with that. It's already tough and not dealing with one teenager. I don't know how you're going to deal with many teenagers.
That's what my auntie said. My auntie told me, it's like, I don't know how you're going to handle it with all these people and all these children. The perspective that I want to also take here is to not come in as the parent or the teacher or someone that's fooling these children, and also not come in as their pal or their best friend, but come in as a mentor. You know what I'm saying? A lot of studies have also shown that people that are successful, people that have mentors. And a lot of time we dismiss that little gap between that teenage years for our children to have a mentor, because I think having a mentor is when you're trying to figure your career path out. Having a mentor is when you're trying to figure your life out. But also our children in that space need somebody that just could hear them and don't have to say anything back to hear.
I wish I can always, I don't know if I can ever be in that space where I'll just listen to her and not have anything to say, but it's a prayer. It's a continuous prayer. Thank you so much for sharing that. Amazing. So I bet looking at what you do on your day-to-day life and your career as a caseworker, I bet that has a lot, that feeds a lot into your podcast, the Self-Reflection Podcast. Tell us a little bit about the Self-Reflection Podcast.
Oh, thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk about my passion and my joy.
Yes.
Self-Reflection Podcast. Self-Reflection Podcast was worth me listening to my own reflections. When I was going through my challenging time, I would do journaling, but I wasn't writing every time I journal. I would mix it up. I would do audio journaling. So one day I was sitting by myself with a little bit of reflection, and I went back and I started listening to my audio. I was like, hey, let me play what this sounds like. What have I been telling myself? Because I didn't remember. Yeah. So I went back and I started listening to it, and something in me felt good. It felt good to listen to myself. It felt good to hear the empowering words that I was giving myself and all the encouragement, because I didn't even know that that's what I was doing for myself. And I was like, oh my God, somebody else could listen to this and somebody else could feel empowered with this. Because at that time I was a peer advocate. I was like, if one of my, members or clients were to listen to this, I'm sure it will probably boost her like self-esteem or self-confidence or whatever, make them feel better. Mm-hmm. So that's where Self-Reflection Podcast came from, on top of everything else that I've experienced. And Self-Reflection Podcast is, I think I'm still building Self-Reflection Podcast. It's still growing. But what I do envision for Self-Reflection Podcast is to be able to support people and empower people to know that they can heal themselves from within themselves. They have the ability to heal themselves. It doesn't matter if it's physically, it doesn't matter if it's emotionally, psychologically, right? And even spiritually, we have that type of power within ourselves. And I think the reason why a lot of people don't have that sense of will within themselves to think that they can heal themselves is because of how the system has always guided us, right? We have relied so much on the medications that have been given to us. We have relied so much on what we have been indoctrinated to think about ourselves. So Self-Reflection Podcast is just here to remind people that, hey, you can heal yourself. You can support yourself. You can have this like light within you, this joy within you, without having to be a millionaire, without having to be a Buddha, without having to be a pastor, without having to be a therapist, a counselor, right? Without having to be something great. You can, as a common individual, you can heal yourself, and we all have that ability to do so. I think a lot of times, I'm not sure how people perceive it, but sometimes I do feel as if someone might be listening to Self-Reflection podcast thinking that I'm trying to tell them what to do. But moreover, it's just a reminder of like, hey, this is the abilities that you have, and I oftentimes use the spiritual perspective there as well. Because I believe in God, and I say, God is me and I am God. I am one with the creator. So with that being said, is I am the God of myself. I am the creator of my life, right? And whatever we speak becomes our reality. So that's what Self-Reflection Podcast is here to remind us to know that we have the power to do anything. Like your podcast.
That's okay. That's self. That reminds us that we have the power to become anything, right? So we truly can be anything we want to become, don't we? That is beautiful. I have a question for you, and let me just know what you think about this. So I am someone that I listen a lot to conservative ideologies or doctrines or stuff because I love to understand where the other people or people that are considered the other people, whether be it left or right. This was all in a bid to understand the whole leftist and rightist thing when I moved into the United States, right? And in one of the discussions that I've listened to, I have heard people talk about therapy. You are someone that promotes self-reflection. The argument that this young woman had about therapy is that she believes that therapists are not useful because therapists just tell you what you should be telling yourself. And listening to you is that power to have to be self-reflexive, right? And so the argument is that therapists are all overrated, and the therapists just take away the ability of humans to use the powers that God has given them and feel that someone else needs to tell them to love themselves. And that is her argument. That she feels that therapists are overrated. So for you, with someone that encourages self-reflection, she believes that self-reflection, again, she does not call it like, but again, it's an explanation of what you just said. She believes that with self-reflection, you have the power to determine what your brain can take. You have the power to sift out what is not important to you. And you have that power to make the decision about what you want to let in your brain space. What is your whole thought about this? Again, just keeping her name out of it. What's your thought about this young woman's idea of therapy being overrated? Because reflection works.
I would say if that's how she feels, it's possibly right. Can't deny how she feels in that space or have any comments via what she feels. However, I would say I think the therapist, right? I'm going to come from different perspective here as well. I think from this perspective, I think therapists are there not to literally fix your life. Right? I think sometimes people go into seeing a therapist expecting that therapist to have all the answers, expecting that therapist to fix every problem that they have, expecting that therapist to be able to revive them and give them a new brain. I think that some people have that expectation of therapists, but also we have to remember that therapists are humans at the end of the day. So when we go in, it's not as if these people are gods or these people have this extra knowledge that we don't have for ourselves. However, some people go into therapists not because they're looking for them to fix their life, but just because they need somebody that is going to listen to them, and also someone that might give them a different shift of perspective, And also, I think that, when she says therapy isn't helpful, I think it's only as helpful as you choose to allow it to be, and And having the right therapist is also important, right? Having the right therapist that matches your values, that matches the type of personality that you have. All of these things plays a role in you having a good therapist, right? That's why I often encourage people before you go into seeing a therapist, interview them. You have to interview these people because they're technically applying for a job. You're hiring them, right? You're hiring them to be support you in this emotional space. So I would encourage anyone that's listening, interview your therapist before you actually start working with them because you want to know if you are going to have a connection with them because that is also important, right? That is a big part of you healing. It's like having a friend that is professional, and a friend that is brutally honest with you. I think sometimes when therapists, what can get blurred in there is that a therapist can also use their own past experience to now bring it into the client's life, right? Because they're human at the same time. So it's up to individuals to be able to make that, judgment in that space. However, I don't think therapy is overrated. I do think that the approach of which therapy takes, I don't think it works every time, because we're more than just our physical body, right? We're more than just the brains that we have. And I think sometimes therapy has limited itself to just altering what the mind does instead of, okay, yes, the mind has all of these things going on for itself. However, there is more parts of you, like your spiritual body, right, that plays a big part in your mental health. I was just thinking the other day, like, the reason why, in my opinion, the reason why most people in America struggle with their mental health is because a lot of us don't believe in something greater than ourselves. America is such a business that people focus just on the material things, right? There was an artist the other day, Ruby Rose. I think she's an artist in the hip hop world. He said she would rather have millions over having morals. And that to me, it's a message that you're passing on into these young girls and these young boys. Even if she meant to say that or she didn't mean to it, subconsciously she's passing those messages to those young girls and young boys. And I think that's where a lot of people struggle with their mental health because we also forget the aspect of our morals that plays a huge part in our life. Because when you notice, for myself at least, when I go against my gut feelings, when I go against my moral ethics, I usually end up beating myself in the head because I'm like, my intuition told me, hey, Lira, don't go that way. Lira, don't do that. But because I want to fulfill my flesh, I follow that path. And then my mental health becomes a problem in that space. So I think therapy, to answer that wholly, I think therapy needs to evolve a little bit more when it comes down to healing because people are more than just a physical body. It has to come into a holistic path as well. And I'm not sure if the system is going to allow that or the reason why it never went that way because of the system not allowing it to go that way because they know if people can have that ability to understand that there's the greater conscious beyond just the physical self, maybe they're going to know that they can heal themselves. So in my opinion, I think therapy is helpful. However, it's up to you to use it to make it useful and helpful for yourself.
That's beautiful. And I love how you brought in your perspective of it because, again, I believe in therapy, but it doesn't stop me from listening to what other people think of it, right? So I love to hear both sides of the thing. I don't know. It feels like the older I get, the more open I am to to contrary opinion. That's why I go looking for these things. So yeah, that's beautiful the way you say it. And because I love to emphasize on the fact that it's important to interview your therapist because this has become so rampant that people just feel like they have to go sit. They just have to go to a therapy. There are people who've been going to therapy for 10, 20 years, right? I don't know if that is important, if it's necessary to consistently see a therapist for 20 years. I feel like it's something that it needs to, I don't know. Let me put it at the level too long.
When I hear that, I see the codependence, right? Now you have to depend on that therapist to be able to be there for you. Not to say that it is not important for you to have a therapist for that long, right? Because healing is a personal journey, right? Healing takes time. Each person goes within their own space. However, it's what do you do in that space, right? Maybe you're going to therapists for 10 years because you just wanted that extra person to talk to every now and then, and you have the
Okay.
money to pay for it, right? It could be that direction. However, if you're going there because you're depending on that person to continue to, make you feel better about yourself, then it's not, therapy is not working for you, unfortunately, right? That's
Okay.
the truth,
Good
the
point.
reality. Because if it was working for you, you would have had those coping skills already on your own to be able to deal with whatever you went in there for. However, like I said, you could be just going there because you enjoy your therapist company.
Yep, thank you. Again, so when I think about it, sometimes I'm like, hey, maybe I'm not being empathetic enough to people, but I love that you've explained it that way, and that justifies how I feel. If you're going to a therapist because you want to deal with something, I think 10 years, it's so long. It means you're not getting the clues. You're not learning. That therapy is not helping you. But if you're going there to find because you need somebody to chat with, somebody that you can just go and air your mind to and come back home, that is completely different, right? So thank you. Hey, I want to give a shout out to all those who have joined. I do appreciate you. I see you, the Roy Mama Show. I see you, big brother Emmanuel, Terrence, Tony. Thank you all so much for joining. I appreciate your time. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to leave your questions in the comment section or your thoughts as well. Lira and I are going to take those when we come to the end of our chat. So we've talked about this, and the reason I deviated a little bit into therapy is because you talked about self-reflection. And would you say self-reflection and meditation as synonymous?
Yes, absolutely. Honestly, I would say not like say to self-reflection, but honestly, there's no way, despite of, I'm gonna say this first, despite of all the help that a person can get, all the help from their therapist, all the help from their counselor, their friends, doctor, whomever, right? Shaman, there's no way that you are going to be able to support yourself and heal yourself internally if you do not do self-reflection, which is the same thing as meditation. When you meditate, you're in your mind, you're in your own thoughts, right? And that's the same thing as doing self-reflection, because when you sit with self, it's you and yourself. There's nobody else. And the only way to alter a person's mind is if that person wants their mind to be changed. The only way to change a behavior is if that person wants that behavior to change. And, even though, yeah, sometimes we get, our mentors could support us, our friends, counselors. However, it's up to you to make that final decision to be like, okay, I thought about this, I meditate about this, and now it feels good for me. And that's why I think a lot of people fall back into like addiction, fall back into some type of bad behavior, fall back into a space where they no longer want to be in, because they're doing things because other people to them want them to do, right? But when it comes from within self, it comes from you believing in yourself and knowing your own worth and knowing your own beliefs. That's a different case. And that's where self-reflection and meditation plays a big role. And I would say they're one and the same, in my opinion.
Awesome. And meditation is something that I try to do. And when I talk about self-reflection, I talk of time for me to introspect, right? Those should be the same thing. But it can be challenging. It can get very distracting. The moment I get really quiet and say, hey, this is me and myself, or myself and I, so many distracting thoughts start coming into mind. How do you, when you talk on your self-reflection podcast and you try to encourage people to find that time, to find that space to do self-reflection, what are some of the tips that you give them for them to be able to find that space where they can actually just be themselves?
Yeah, I love how you say distracting thoughts. I want to say, like, in my opinion, because I don't know how you feel, but in my opinion, those are not distracted thoughts. Those are the thoughts that are evoked in that moment. The only moment that truly exists is the present. And you know what I'm saying? And if your thoughts are coming from wherever they are, that means those are the thoughts that needed to get processed. And a lot of times when we get to that space, we see those thoughts come in, those distracted thoughts come in, we're like, oh no, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. We start to be like, okay, this is not what I'm here for. But in all essence, that's why you're there. That's why you're there, to allow your brain to process those things. Those thoughts are thoughts that you probably have pushed in the back, and they have been trying to surface themselves so that you can let it go. But because we don't let it go, when we get into that space of meditating, when those thoughts comes in, we're like, oh no, I want to actually be at peace. I want to meditate, and I want to, not think about X, Y, and Z. But those are the things that we need to think about, so that when we're done with that space, we're like, okay, I thought about that. Now I have a solution for it. Right? If it was a problem, let's say a business that you've been trying to do for yourself, and that business idea has been lingering in your mind, and you go to meditate, and all you could feel yourself is business, business. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's the space where you say, okay, let those thoughts come in, because from that space you get the answer to that business idea, right? You now say, okay, let's say you wanted to start a clothing business. From that place, right, different type of idea of clothing might come into the mind. Different type of websites might come into the mind. People that you need to reach out to might come into mind, right? But when we start fighting it, all of those things gets pushed aside. The solutions gets pushed aside, because our body, mind, and soul is focusing on the problem instead of focusing on the solution. And that's where meditation kind of brings us into this space where it's okay. Whatever comes in the mind, it's okay. I think the body is going to recognize when it's ready to shut down the mind and just be. And there's that little space of gap of emptiness that comes in with, because they are they're doing things because other people to them, want them to do, right? But when it comes from within self, it comes from you believing in yourself and knowing your own worth and knowing your own beliefs. That's a different case, and that's where self-reflection and meditation plays a big role. And I would say they're one and the same, in my opinion.
Awesome. And meditation is something that I try to do. And when I talk about self-reflection, I talk of time for me to introspect, right? Those should be the same thing. But it can be challenging. It can get very distracting. The moment I get really quiet and say, hey, this is me and myself, or myself and I, so many distracting thoughts start coming into mind. How do you, when you talk on your self-reflection podcast and you try to encourage people to find that time, to find that space to do self-reflection, what are some of the tips that you give them for them to be able to find that space where they can actually just be themselves?
Yeah, I love how you say distracting thoughts. I want to say, like, in my opinion, because I don't know how you feel, but in my opinion, those are not distracted thoughts. Those are the thoughts that are evoked in that moment. The only moment that truly exists is the present. And you know what I'm saying? And if your thoughts are coming from wherever they are, that means those are the thoughts that needed to get processed. And a lot of times when we get to that space, we see those thoughts come in, those distractive thoughts come in. We're like, oh no, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. We start to be like, okay, this is not what I'm here for. But in all essence, that's why you're there. That's why you're there, to allow your brain to process those things. Those thoughts are thoughts that you probably have pushed in the back, and they have been trying to surface themselves so that you can let it go. But because we don't let it go, when we get into that space of meditating, when those thoughts comes in, we're like, oh no, I want to actually be at peace. I want to meditate, and I want to, not think about X, Y, and Z. But those are the things that we need to think about, so that when we're done with that space, we're like, okay, I thought about that. Now I have a solution for it. Right? If it was a problem, let's say a business that you've been trying to do for yourself, and that business idea has been lingering in your mind, and you go to meditate, and all you could feel yourself is business, business. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? That's the space where you say, okay, let those thoughts come in, because from that space you get the answer to that business idea, right? You now say, okay, let's say you wanted to start a clothing business. From that place, right, different type of idea of clothing might come into the mind. Different type of websites might come into the mind. People that you need to reach out to might come into mind, right? But once we start fighting it, all of those things gets pushed aside. The solutions gets pushed aside because our body, mind, and soul is focusing on the problem instead of focusing on the solution. And that's what meditation kind of brings us into this space where it's okay, whatever comes in the mind, it's okay. I think the body is going to recognize when it's ready to shut down the mind and just be. And there's that little space of gap of emptiness that comes in within that space.
It is not as easy as you say to just let those start
I
because
just want to say it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of moments where you actually cry. It takes a lot of heavy emotions to come in, and sometimes it's challenging to come in, or challenging to just let it go because of our own belief system, right? So it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of unpacking and unlearning and all of these things that people don't really think about in a day-to-day life. So it takes a lot of work. It's not easy. Doing self-reflection is not easy, and that's why a lot of people don't do it, because it's such a challenging thing to do. But it's definitely doable, and there's a lot of life that comes from that place.
yeah, I bet there is because the moments that I have successfully, when I say successfully, is because, as you say, for me, I generally would try to push some of those thoughts aside. I'm like, hey, I'm here for this, not for you. Get behind me, right? I do that a lot. I'm like, so again, what I have learned from you today is when some of those thoughts come, deal with them, right? Deal with them at that moment when they come instead of pushing them, because I do that and I'm like, oh God, I can't do this. I'm gone. Then I go
Yeah.
back to doing something else because in my mind, I've always looked at those things. That's why I call them distractive thoughts, because I tell myself that, hey, I want to be in this space with myself and just chat with myself. But at the same time, I am shutting down certain things that are also part of myself. You
Yeah.
get it? So,
Agree. Yeah, I
so
agree. I think that's a lovely way to put it. It's part of who you are in that moment. So you can't, I think a lot of us try to close off parts of us that um, you know, are also part of the healing process that we need to heal, right? A lot of us don't do that shadow work that we need to
mhm.
do. Was in Are afraid to do that. So sometimes when those distractive thoughts comes in, it's because of the shadow work that we haven't done to in that space, and it's pushing you, right? It's forcing you to look at it, but at the same time, sometimes we just don't want to look at it. So
Yeah. I personally, there's times I don't want to look at it. I don't want to deal with it, at least not now. But then it
yeah,
distracts me from going forward, from having that moment of self reflection. And
yeah.
I really love how you put it. I love how you break it down and just throw the light, right? Throw the importance of having those moments and dealing with our thoughts, with our internal being. And when you explain about believing in something bigger than self, right?
Yeah.
Please, I need you to throw a little bit of light on that, because there are some people who don't understand that whole, hey, there is something bigger than me. There is something that I need to, whatever it is, right? I'm a Christian. I don't impose my beliefs on anybody. But if somebody believes in anything bigger than them, how does that help in the process of self reflection when you talk about it?
That's such a beautiful question. Because I think growing up, right, we believe, oh, me, I grew up in a Christian home, and I believe in God, and I knew that God was everything, right? um and when we believe in God in that sense of when it comes down to self-reflection, or when we believe in a higher force, right, it is us also believing in ourselves, because this one true thing that truly exists in this world is consciousness. That's the only thing that truly exists. And the fact that if we can give ourselves that opportunity to believe in something greater than us, right, then we can give ourselves the opportunity and the chance to allow that thing to also carry our stress, carry our burdens, carry our pain, right? We can allow that thing to say, take away this pain from me, take away and forgive me, allow me to heal, allow me to go free. And because when we do that within self-reflection, when we tell this higher being, this higher consciousness, you know take all these things away from me, right, there is this freeness that comes within self, in that space. Because not only does it feel light, not only do you feel light physically, right? Right? There's this knowing that comes in that process, which also it takes time, but there's this
Yeah.
knowing that comes in that process, that that there's a greater force that could literally heal you. There's a greater
Mm,
force that can carry all your burden and you don't have to deal with it. Right? There's
mm,
like, I saw this video the other day. It says, dream as big as you can and then send the bill to God. God can handle the bill. So when we don't self-reflect, and when we don't believe in a higher force, it is us actually minimizing and reducing ourselves. And again, it's part of the indoctrination of the world that we have lived in, where they don't inspire us and encourage us to believe in something that is greater than ourselves. And I also want to just say that God isn't a physical being, right? That's a spirit, that's an energy, right? God is everywhere. God is under the rock, God is under the sun, God is the sun, God is the tree, God is the light that we see, God is energy. So when we deny ourselves of this greater force, then we're denying a huge part of us, because we're one and the same with that consciousness, with that energy, with that spiritual being. And to add is, I think people need to also recognize that they are spiritual beings and not just physical beings, right?
yes.
People need to know that there are spiritual beings in physical bodies, right? Our bodies are just vessels. Our bodies are just here temporarily. However, our spiritual self is something that is everlasting, because no one truly knows where the body goes or the mind goes after we die. And no one truly understands where we come from as humans. So when we
Mhm.
deny a part of ourselves and say, oh, there's no greater force in us, and we shut down a part of the portal which we can create the life that we want, which we talk about self-reflection, right? It's that self-reflection is that pathway to you, like creating that future that you want, creating that life that you want, and becoming one with that greater force that exists.
Wow. Self reflection. No other person could have done that better. Thank you so much for just making this as easy to understand as possible. Thanks again for breaking that down. And hey, so if you just joined us, I'm talking to Lira Ndifon here today. She is the host of Self Reflection Podcast. I see all of you who have joined. I see Emmanuel. I see a comment from Emmanuel, and she says, I think this is when we're talking about the whole therapy, how to start self reflection. And he says that's correct. That's the starting point. The person should first accept that there is a problem and that they need help. Otherwise, therapy might not work, right? You need to acknowledge that first step of acknowledging that there is something that needs to be fixed before you even start talking to a therapist. Because when that thing gets fixed, you need to stop. If you're going for years, it means that the therapy is not working. Stop paying them your money. Okay. They are not cheap. Therapy, they are not cheap. You get it? Thank you, Tony, and thank you so much for the stars. Yes, thank
Yeah,
you. Yeah, you were saying something.
I said, bring me the money.
All right.
I'm just
Oh, that's right. Oh, no, that's good. Thank you all so much. We appreciate you all for joining. And if you have any questions for Lyra, please put them in the comment section. She will be taking these questions. And I hope that you have pressed the share button on this video already. Hopefully, you've shared. And thanks again. Lyra, so I told you I was going to throw a question at you today. Probably not. I didn't tell you about it, but it's not a tough one, but just something that we can chat on while we see if anybody has a question for us, right? In your experience, being a Cameroonian girl, I'm not sure how soon you came to the US and how long you've lived here. What would you say are some of the challenges that you as a person, as a young girl growing up in the US, and that young girl that you say you're not born here, so you came from Cameroon, you know where you came from, that young girl from that came to the US and is building a life for herself. What would you say are some of the challenges that you've faced, be it from your experience going to school here, going through college, becoming a caseworker, and even in your awesome podcasting life? What are some of those challenges that you have to deal with daily?
I guess I could give us a little story. I talk a lot. I'm sorry.
If I need someone that can talk more than me, I give you the mic. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I guess I could start with like moving to this country from a very young age. Just being able to adapt with the other kids and try to navigate that lifestyle from like growing in Cameroon and then living here, it's two different worlds. So when a young person like myself and other young people come here, we're trying to be part of the system here. So sometimes there's that denial from the society, right, from with the other kids and all of that. There's that denial that because we don't sound like them, because I didn't speak the way I speak today, right? I had an accent, because I still have an accent till up to today. So because I don't sound like them, because I don't speak proper English, because language is something that you can't say. Language is based on the person's experience and lifestyle and all of those
That's the
things.
most beautiful thing you said today. That is the most beautiful thing I've picked out from you today. There is nothing like a perfect language.
Mhm.
Language is based on the person that is speaking it and in what environment they find themselves. Oh God, I just love that you think that way. Please go ahead. Sorry for interrupting you.
Thank you, thank you. You're making me hot now. I'm blushing. My cheeks are so
You're blushing purple.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, thank
Go
you.
ahead.
So yeah, from that perspective, as a little child, trying to adapt to the system, I think that was a little bit challenging, but trying to fit in, which I end up, from my experience, I end up playing basketball, and that I feel like that saved me, because with that, it allowed me to have a community of women or girls that had the same similar interests as I did as a little girl, which helped me build friendships and connection, and also from that, I understood the system a little bit more. So my
Yeah.
advice to young African or a young any immigrant, right? Immigrant from anywhere. If you're coming into this country, it's important for you to attach yourself to some type of activity outside of just going to school, right? Whatever it's you playing sports or you going to a spelling bee challenge, but you want to do something that is interesting you, right? Something that you actually going to enjoy doing, because if you don't enjoy doing, it's going to be a chore. But if you do enjoy doing it, regardless of the amount of like, people that are in that space, you're going to have a great time in it, and you're going to learn a lot faster than if you're going to do something that you don't enjoy doing. And then as I grew up, as a young adult, going to Sonoma State, fast forward, going into Sonoma State and actually struggling with my mental health. That was a challenge for me there, because I didn't know what mental health was for myself, right? Despite the fact that I have been studying human development and early childhood studies and trying to understand how the human body works, I still didn't understand what it's like to have mental health challenge, because I've never truly experienced it for myself. So once I got to experience it, it was a whole different ball game. And so that was challenging, and trying to know who to talk to about these things. Sometimes I remember just staying in my room for days. I wouldn't go out of my room because I was so down on myself, which was all related to basketball. Thinking about it now, I laugh about it. But in that moment, it was so real and so serious, and it was a big deal for me not to, neglect my emotions that I felt at that time, because it was truly real for me in that moment. But with the mindset that I have now, with the type of attitude that I have now, I think it's something that wasn't worth stressing about. Not at all. Yeah, in that space, just trying to navigate and find the appropriate help was also challenging for me, because coming from an immigrant family, it's like you don't talk about the things that you're struggling with, right? You don't put your family business out there. You don't air yourself out there. So, that was a challenge for me, just to be able to sit with my um, senior advisor and trying to navigate my feelings in that space. So, for I don't know, any immigrant child that's coming up, I hope that there's more people like myself and yourself, that are talking about things like this. and also for all the young immigrants that are coming into the country, is be okay with going to someone that you trust and talking to them about what you're feeling and what's going on in your life. It's very helpful. And then now, as an adult, living in this American system and trying to work and trying to build a business, I think having the right mentor and knowing the right people, and just being willing to not be afraid to shut yourself out. I think that's something that I've been learning. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help, because people are always willing to help. And,
Yep.
put yourself out there, and don't allow the barriers of your belief system, which was the belief system that was indoctrinated in your life. Find your own belief system, and, just trust yourself and believe.
Wow. Listening to you, it's like I need you to talk to a group of teenage kids that are from Cameroon, right? It's just, I just listen to you and it is so relatable because I did not go to school here. I came here as an adult, but I have a young kid that came here probably around the same age that Joanna has to go through elementary school, middle school, and dealing with the challenges, with the conflict of culture and values, trying to find themselves, finding them, wanting to belong, right? Going to the extent that you find at some point, I feel like my little one has lost herself because she wants to be that person that the society wants of her. Man, it is such a struggle. So when I'm listening to you, it's giving me goosebumps because it's something that I am experiencing as a parent. And I sit each day and I pray that I have the wisdom to deal with it in the right way for the child. You get it? And not that I want to let go of my value system as a Cameroonian daughter or mother, but be in the present to deal with my child in the present and help support them in a way that will help them grow in the present, in the current society. Oh my God, you're right. It is such a challenge. So listening to you talk, it's like, wow, okay. So this is something that a lot of other kids experience. What my little one is experiencing today is a reality of many other kids out there. At some point, listening to her, I was like, girl, you can have a podcast for other African immigrant and for other immigrant children, right? Just sharing what you experience every day. Things are getting better as she gets older because,
Yeah.
yes, she found herself a club. She is a dancer. So she found herself in a team, which I believe has made her more aware. And there's still challenges in there, like it or not. But that ability to belong somewhere, I think that it has just made her a better person. And I just keep praying that things get better. And when I see young girls like you who have grown in that same system, who've had to deal with those things and still turn out to be a very motivative and assertive and outspoken woman or young woman like you, it takes away some of my fear as a parent, right? It just makes me believe that, hey, in spite of all the challenges that we're facing now with these kids as they grow, as they're trying to get used to the system, they are going to turn out good. So, truth be told, you just gave me some level of assurance that one day my baby will turn out good. Okay. Okay. That is beautiful. Thank you so much. I never knew that this is what we're gonna come talk about today, but this has just led this conversation has just spiraled into something that we want to talk about more as immigrants,
Yeah.
especially as immigrants with children in this country. How are our children doing? How are
Hmm.
these kids doing?
Yeah, yeah. I love that you shared that, because I also think that looking from a looking from a parent's perspective, um, I think it's important for our parents to also not put so much pressure on themselves, because our parents are also experiencing a whole new culture, a whole new system, and they're just trying to figure everything out at the same time, trying to food on the table, trying to see the kids from school. This is something that is a norm in African parents. You don't drop your kids at school; they walk to school, or they have a bunch of kids that they walk with. So I think there is that middle ground between like our parents and us, the young immigrants, whether it's first generation or second generation, right? I think there is that middle ground that are within us that we have to find to navigate. And I think more young people like myself, more young children that are first generation immigrants or immigrants like myself, we have to have that empathy and understanding for our parents, that they didn't grow up in this system that we're trying to navigate. And and be able to have that compassion for our parents, to know that um they're also like learning at the same time. Why, even though they're our parents, they don't know it all, and they're also learning. And it is up to us both to find a healthy balance of where the parent gets to understand, like, my child is still trying to figure this world out, and then the parents understanding, like, I don't know this world that my child is living in. Even though we are the adult in this space, but you still have no idea of what this child is truly experiencing in that world. And it's up to us together to find that compassion and empathy for one another, and to want to come not only to understand, but to just hear each other in this space. And I think a lot of our parents have a lot of pressure on their back. And I think, I in this moment, if any African parent is listening, and I think it's important for you guys to let it go a little bit, and don't put that much pressure on yourself, because the more you put pressure on yourself, that's the same type of pressure you project on your children. And I just want to let our African parents know, like, you guys are doing an amazing job living in a country that not only doesn't accept Black people or Africans, right, or immigrants in a way, but you're also living in a culture, in a system, in a culture where it's totally different from what your norm is. And yeah, I want to give our parents grace in this time. I think they have tried. And moving from Africa to here, it's a whole different, like, hello, like, and just to think of, people don't see that. It's like African parents, when they move here, they literally abandon everything they know. They abandon their life, they abandon family, they abandon like everything that they have there, just to come here so that the children can have a better life. And I think children also have to see from that perspective, where it's like, damn, my mom, my dad just left everything for me just to come to this country to give me a better future. Oh, I can't hear you.
You're talking to me, and sorry, I had to tear up a little bit because it feels like you're talking to me, right? And when I say that, it's because sometimes as parents, we fail to understand that we are doing a lot. You get it? And I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I'm hugging you through the computer.
I'm sorry about this, but most parents are scared of that they are scared to fail.
Yeah.
Most parents are worried that their children will make the news. Most African parents, they are scared that at some point their children are just going to not be what they were supposed to be. And just listening to you calling on children to show their parents some grace, right? I don't know. It is tough bringing up these kids in this country, and at the same time, trying to make sure that they are on a good lane. And just listening to you talk, I wanted to go off video, but I instantly muted myself. But you know what? It's okay. It's okay to express the emotions. And the reason I tear up is because I understand what some of these parents are going through. They have to put food on the table. They have to work. At the same time, they have to be there for these kids. Some of them have to go to work overnight because they have to earn the money. The system is not cheap. I know the image that the people who live in the diaspora put out here, and it all looks like it's all flamboyant. It is not.
Yeah.
These parents are struggling. You get it? And I feel like just telling the parents, like giving them some grace, like just saying, hey, you know what, you're doing an amazing job. Do not burn yourself down. Understand that these kids are still going to grow up. Some of the kids are pretty tough on their parents because the expectations are wild.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that you talk about that, being a child that has grown up in this country, and you're talking to somebody that is a parent in this country. And I watch my own child and her own challenges that she faces. And I am grateful that she is a kid that listens, a kid that was born in Cameroon. And I don't even call her a first generation American because she's not born here. Right. A kid that came over from Cameroon and all of that, and has to deal with the difference in culture. And sometimes I have to deal with her confusion, trying to make her understand. And I see Tony in the comment section, says she is that is one of those parents. God help us. Right. It is challenging. It is hard. A lot of people don't come out to talk about these things, but I have just listening to you has taken me through some self-reflection. And I'm thinking that's probably why I just could not hold it in. And I don't know.
No,
I need to take a deep breath.
I wanted to thank you for even sharing that part of yourself with us. Like you said, a lot of people in this, a lot of us that come in this country, right? We don't say, exactly what some of the struggles are, right? Because some parents have to work 2 jobs, 12-hour shifts, just to provide for their family members. And sometimes we don't give our parents that credit. And yeah, there's that. I think I love the fact that Africans are starting to tell their own story, because, in my opinion, I think Africans from Africa, right, have not been telling their own story. I think the story has come from white people or African Americans in America or in Britain, wherever they are, right? Those people that are established here, they have a different story than what we have in Africa, or what we grew up in. And I love the fact that there's spaces like this, right? There's spaces to which where Africans cannot start to express like what they actually have been through, because a lot of times, people don't really have the idea of Africa as humans that are living in that continent, right? Because we have always been seen as people that we work for all these industry companies. They come in, they use us, they abuse us, they neglect us. So they have never truly seen Africans as from that humanitarian perspective, from that human light perspective, because all they see is minerals and resources and slaves. But I think it warms my heart to see Africans like myself and you and all the other African creators that are out here putting our stories out, because it's important for our children to be able to see that, right? Because when our children comes in the future and they see content like this, right, they understand like, where they're coming from, where their ancestors, what our ancestors have been through, what our parents have been through, right? What life was like for us. And I just love the fact that Africans are out here telling our own story. It's important for us to do that. And I want to encourage more Africans to be able to tell their story, because if we continue to let other people tell our story, they're always going to tell it from their perspective, from their narrative that doesn't fit our reality. Yeah. So thank you for sharing. That's my whole spiel.
Yes, that is beautiful. And it just touched me really hard listening to you talk. And it took me to that spot where with with what most parents have to deal with today. We all know that bringing up teenage kids can be challenging, right? Not can be, it is challenging because these little ones are trying to find themselves too, right? They're trying to discover themselves. And so all crazy hormones come into place, right? But just listening to you talk as another kid that has grown up in this system, it just gives me that hope that in spite of the challenging days that parents are experiencing with their kids when they are in this young teenage, they can actually grow up and become great people like you, become like meaningful human beings like you. It could be challenging, truth be told. It is hard. And I speak for all parents out here. I speak for all the parents who have teenage children. It is tough. And just to hear you talk like this and put yourself in the shoe of, you even decide to talk like talk to another African parent like myself and give that encouragement that, hey, you know what? We see what you people are doing. We see the struggles that you are going through to give us the kind of life that we want to live in this country and become this country and in the world at large, right? And just, Lira, you melt my heart. I want to hug you so bad, for real. I truly want to hug you so bad. Thank you so much for sharing this. It is such an encouragement, not only to us as parents, but to other parents out there and also to the kids, right? Again, my platform is not for kids, but I bet that I'll definitely be making some reels that I will show my daughter out of this, like, hey, this is someone that grew up in the US like you, and this is what they're becoming. And this is, so the challenges you're facing today, these challenges should not break you, right? Face them and just know that there are better days ahead. Truth be told, you just made my day.
Thank you. Thank you. And for all our young ones, because I'm all about the young generation. I'm all about empowering our young generation. For all of us, the young ones, I think one thing that we do is run away from challenges, or one thing we're seeing the older people do is run away from the challenges that we face in this world, right? I just want to encourage you in this moment to embrace challenges, because regardless if you like it or not, you're going to go through a challenging moment. Regardless if you like it or not, you're going to betray yourself at some point, right? Where you're going to get upset at yourself. You're going to get mad at yourself. You're going to feel alone at times, right? So I just want you to embrace those moments when it happens, because those are the moments that are going to allow you to grow. Those are the moments that are going to allow you to make decisions for yourself that are aligned with your values, with your principles, with your morals. Because if you don't go through those challenging moments, you're never going to know what is on the other side, right? If you ignore the challenges that come your way or you run away from them, then you will never know what is behind that fence. But if you push through, allow yourself to go through that challenges, give yourself grace, not to say that you're not going to feel pain in that moment, but give yourself grace in that moment and have empathy for yourself in that moment, not self-pity, not sorrow, or however dark emotions we feel in that space. None of those low vibration energy, but give yourself empathy and grace in that space, and know that you're supposed to face challenges. And when those challenging moments come, tell them, I welcome them. Welcome the challenging moments, and push through it, and go through it, and find supportive people, right? Be around people that are supportive. Be around people that wants to uplift you. Be around people that wants to see you grow. And not to say that you're not going to hit conflict, not to say that you're not going to have an argument with your mom or your dad or your best friends. But when those moments come, ask yourself, what is the lesson? Is this moment teaching me? And what can I gain from it? And if you can't gain anything from it, it's okay to let it go and move on. But if you can gain something from it, grab the knowledge, grab the lessons from it, and keep it pushing. Because nothing really matters in this world but you being the best version of yourself.
Thank you so much, Lira. I do appreciate you. This was scheduled to be a 1 hour session, and we're already at 1 hour, 12 minutes. But hey, This has been a great conversation. If you have any questions, I'd already put in the pledge. If you have any questions to ask Lira, again, you have a lot of kudos in the comment section. A lot of people feel like what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And I just want to thank you again for sharing your thoughts, for just agreeing, talking to both the parents and the children, as being a kid that grew up in the system and having an understanding of this and talking about it. I do love that you agreed and you decided we to not only talk about the self-reflection podcast, and you can see that self-reflection truly works, right? This is you and I here talking and chatting with no prep. This was a freestyle conversation, no conversations with you prior to this, and we are able to have this kind of a valuable chat. That is because in the course of talking and all of this, I'm reflecting on the things that you're saying, and that just leads me into asking you one question and another. And I'm happy that you did respond to all the questions I put in front of you. I gave you the chance to defer a question if you didn't want to answer it, but hey, you did answer all the questions I had for you, and I really do appreciate you. The tradition of my podcast is before we drop the mic, I give you the opportunity. I know you've done that already in the course of talking, but I do give you the opportunity to put your voice out there. I always, in my mind, I know that I have that power to put you on top of the world with one microphone from the You Can Be Anything podcast to talk to the world. And if there is anything you had the opportunity to speak out to the world today, what would that thing be? That would be our final slot of the podcast. What would that thing be? The mic is yours.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really grateful that you allow me to come on your platform and share my thoughts, share my opinion and my experience. I could not be more grateful. I think one of the things that I wanted to do this year was to be able to get on other people's platform and express myself. And I'm truly grateful that you allowed me to be here with you. To answer your final question, what do I want to put out into the world? I think I just want to go back to this, the morals and having ethics for self. I'm going to paraphrase here because I can't really remember the full quote, but there's a quote that says by Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is a psychologist in the Western world. And he says that you don't get to choose if you pay a price or not. You get to choose what price you pay, right? And that brings me to, if you choose to take an action, there's a price for you to pay for that, right? And if you choose not to take an action, there's a price for you to pay for that as well. So whatever you do with yourself or whatever you do in this world as an individual, right, from an individual perspective, whatever we truly do, it's all up to us to make a decision if we want to listen to our morals, we want to do things from the heart space, we want to do things from the kind mindset, we want to do things from the gentle mindset. Not to say that it's going to always happen, right? But it is up to us to choose what path we want to take, because at the end of the day, there is a consequence that you're going to have to pay, right? You don't get to choose if you don't pay or not, because the reality is Mother Nature is going to allow you to do whatever you want. God is going to support you in any idea and any thoughts that you have for yourself and for other people. So if you choose to live in a negative light, if you choose to speak negatively to yourself, talk down to yourself, right? Then that's the vibration that you're inviting in your life, and that's where you're going to live. But if you choose to do self-reflection and empower yourself and motivate yourself and uplift yourself and uplift the people that are around you, right? That's the energy that you're going to evolve in, because again, life is all about energy and us working with this Mother Nature, this world that we're in. So, and also a shout out to all the Africans out here. I think we're out here doing God's work, living the best life that we can. A lot of people don't understand that a lot of people in Africa are struggling, right? People don't make up to $50 a month sometimes. So, shout out to all the Africans that are able to make it out and make a way for themselves, whether if it's in the motherland or in the diaspora, right? I'm rooting for all of us and all my young Africans. Continue to feel bold. Don't feel as if you have to shut yourself out. Continue to feel bold, feel empowered. Feel like you can be anything. You can do anything you want. And know for yourself that you can be anything you want. Just like this podcast, right? The title of this podcast that we're on. Literally, you can be anything. It all stems in the mind. Whatever you think is how your life is going to unfold. What you speak with the tongue is what is going to evolve in your life. So believe in yourself, trust the process. Don't quit on yourself and keep going. And remember to put God first. Thank you.
Some did I cut you out? Sorry. Let me get back. Thank you so much. Look at this. I just could not stay on camera, but you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear
Yeah,
you.
awesome. I had to leave you on there.
Hello. I'm not sure what happened to her. Hi, guys. I feel I don't want to exit the podcast in case she's coming back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry. I said I had to turn off my microphone because it's got messed up. But hey, I want to thank you so much, Lira, for making the time to come on the podcast today. I 100% appreciate you. Okay.
Thank you.
And just so you know, I would definitely want to talk to you again at some point. I definitely want to have a chat with you and just let's talk more about being parents in Africa, being parents from Africa, be it mother or father, I don't care the gender, being
Yeah.
parents from Africa and bringing up our kids here. And the reason I would love to do that with you is because of your experience, because of what you do on a daily, because based on what you have told us, you're exposed to these kids, you have the experience to talk to them. And I would just love to have you on the podcast again, if you don't mind, at some point so that we can have conversations like this. So thank you again. I want to appreciate all of you who joined. I see my friend Shari. I see you. Thank you, Mamulu, my other sister, for joining. Zitambong, thank you so much. It's been an amazing episode. I hope that you all had a great time as I did. It was a
Mhm.
deep one for me, but it definitely it's one filled with lessons. There's just a lot. As I'm getting out of my office today, it just feels different. I love that I had this learning experience with you. Thank you also, Niema, for joining. I appreciate you all. And Terence for staying the whole podcast. You're the
Yeah.
best. Thank you. And Will's a colon. A lot of people think you're amazing. That means, please, when I invite you again, say yes. There is a lot of good that will come out of you. I appreciate you, my dear. Thank you once
Thank,
more. And hey,
thank
no,
you.
before we go, how can people find your podcast? I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah,
You put
yeah.
so much emotions in me that I even forgot that question, girl.
Thank you. You can find my social media for stuff. You can find me on Instagram and on TikTok at Lira Lira underscore Ndifon. That is Lira Lira underscore Ndifon. That is social media on TikTok, Instagram, and even Facebook. You can find me that way. And also, you can find Self Reflection Podcast on almost every platform you get your podcast from. And if you go on my Instagram or my TikTok, there's a link in the bio where you could click on it and it'll take you straight to Self Reflection Podcast.
Amazing. Please find her and follow her.
Oh,
This
sorry.
is young Cameroonian woman that just has a lot to give. So please kindly follow her. Go ahead, my dear.
Sorry, one more thing. I just want to also direct people to my website. Go ahead, click on the link in my bio, and you can find me on my website. If you're an African parent that wants to, talk about working this, navigating this system with your child, or just wanting some tips in this space, find me on my website.
Website. What's your
Yeah,
website? Let me type it and pin it in the
it's
thing.
it's called On Guard the Soul. I can actually send it to you.
Okay, yeah, it'll be nice so I can pin it. If somebody finds it, they can find you as well.
Yeah,
Uh, I do appreciate you for this time. So if you send it to me, then I can pin it. I can add it to the comment and pin it so they can find you. Awesome.
I
All
just
right.
message you on WhatsApp.
Okay, let me get that and paste it on goddesssoul.com. Awesome. So I'm adding her website, the comment section. Please check out her website. And wow, this has been an amazing one. And thanks again for joining me. Thanks again for having these conversations. And I look forward to more conversations with you whenever you are available. And thanks again, my dear. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye,
Awesome.
guys.
Bye bye. Whoa, whoa. Thank you all so much for joining. I did pin her website. It's in the comment section on guardthesoul.com. So please kindly check out her website. Find her on Instagram. I think she has a link tree on her Instagram as well, where you can find her on. And her Instagram is Lira_Ndifon. So it's Lira_Ndifon. That's her Instagram. If you find her on Instagram, then you'll be able to find the link to all her other social media, um, all her other social media spaces. This was a beautiful conversation, and truth be told, when I come to conversations like this, I am not coming with any prepared questions in mind. I love to talk to people openly. I love freestyle, but I do give my guests the opportunity as well to defer questions if they do not feel like responding to them. And that is how my conversation with Lyra went today. And to think that this young woman poked me so hard to pull out some strange emotions out of me, I think it was a beautiful conversation, a very educative one. And this is one of those podcast sessions or live sessions that I pray that a lot of people get to watch. So if you're watching me now and you have not shared the video, kindly click on the share button. And hey, guess what? I have subscriptions on the You Can Be Anything podcast. So all of you who are on my Solange Che page, I need you to please follow You Can Be Anything podcast and subscribe. It just means it's not just. It means you get to give me 99 cents each month. If 99 cents is too small, let me know. I can push it to 2.99 or 5.99. So that would be your own way of supporting the You Can Be Anything podcast until we finally get monetized. That time will come. But for now, I am qualified, eligible for subscription. So please kindly subscribe to my You Can Be Anything podcast Facebook page. And if you're not following me on YouTube, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I appreciate you so much. Kindly like the video and share it so your own network can follow You Can Be Anything podcast. And again, remember, if you know of anybody that is willing to share their stories, willing to have conversations like this, do not hesitate to refer them, and I'll have these conversations with them. The more we talk about things like this, the more we learn. This babe came in here today to interview another podcaster, but I think I left feeling way better. I got more out of this podcast than I think she even did. So I hope that you also got a lot out of it. Thank you, Terence. I do appreciate you. And thank you. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
You got the power, you got the strength. All you need is a will, this is the knowledge you got to learn. Because it is real.
Thank you so much for being part of the You Can Be Anything podcast tribe. I appreciate you for spending the time with us. Please kindly follow the podcast on all the social media platforms at You Can Be Anything podcast. And if you like to watch the video versions of the episodes, you can find those on YouTube under my name, Solange Che. Please kindly subscribe to that channel. I'd appreciate it. Also, if you would like to support the podcast, there is a support button on the website, www.youcanbeanythingpodcast.com, where you can click on to support the podcast. And for you who is ready to be my guest, do not hesitate to reach out either on the social media platforms or just email me at youcanbeanything21@gmail.com. I'll be happy to have you. Stay blessed and be good to each other. Bye bye.